Hello and welcome to Cantrip Conversations. I'm Brandon Tharp, the Dungeon Master for We Cantrip, a D&D podcast, and the host here at Cantrip Conversations. Today I'm joined by a guest star who is going to be talking about some really cool role-playing, character immersion, D&D type things, Brady Hendricks. Brady Hendricks is from the Average Joe Show and City Within the Walls podcast. Brady, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, how's it going?
We're good.
Like you said, I do the Average Joe Show podcast where we basically just kind of find silly, funny news stories and just kind of talk about them and joke about them. And then the City Within the Walls is actually an audio drama that we do that's kind of set in a post-apocalyptic setting where basically everybody lives within one big city, and there's a lot of murder and intrigue and political stuff, and it's a lot of fun. I actually currently at the moment voice about 4 or 5 different characters. And I've just recently actually started helping write it a little bit. So
Awesome.
It's a fun journey.
That's cool. So you do this with other people then, right? So it's not like, is
Yes.
it run by you or is it run by somebody else?
No.
Part of the show?
It is run by somebody else. I'm a voice actor, and he actually found me on Reddit.
Nice.
By posting looking for somebody. And then I joined in, and it's just, we've had fun. It's a full cast. So we have a bunch of people involved.
That's really cool. I've heard of some frequent, like, more audio dramas popping up more and more on, like, different, like, podcast pages and stuff, because podcasts are, like, growing immensely, like, in today's world, like, the technological advances and stuff that we're going through. But podcasting is just a really big thing. And the more I scroll through, I see a lot of audio drama, just like storytelling. There's a plethora of D&D podcasts. There just is. And, I'm one of the plethora. Like, we have our show that's mixed in with the hundreds and hundreds of, other D&D shows. And that's more of like an improv drama show because it's D&D.
Sure.
Whereas your guys, it's scripted, correct?
Correct.
See, that, I find that really interesting in the sense that, like, it's almost like, audiobooks are a big thing now too. So it's almost like as if you kind of like listening to an audiobook, but I don't know. I think the concept really it's really damn cool. So that's just me.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us maybe a little insight on what the show is like currently going through, like kind of maybe like the premise and backstory, like?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's there's not really I guess the closest you'd say to our main character is his name is Grady. He is one of the 2 commissioners of the policing force. Basically, they have there's a council that runs everything in the city, and the council has there's 2 policing forces and then an enforcer who basically keeps the council's peace. And Theron is he's the chief of police of the Northern Policing Force, and he is also the son of one of the counselors. So he basically he's eventually going to become a counselor or councilman himself. And so he's mostly the focus character. There is a group that's working against the council, trying to undermine them and kind of bring about, their ideas. They want to bring about democracy for everybody, but obviously, they're the bad guys. So it's not really what they're after. But it's got a lot of stuff. Like, basically the whole thing that kicks off the story is the enforcer gets kidnapped. And so at the beginning, it's a mystery of where he went and what happened to him. And now it's kind of gearing up. We're about 3 or 4 episodes out from being done with our first season, and we're just kind of leading up to some heavy drama and actually a little bit of action.
No, so you're getting towards the peak of the season finale, the season arc.
Right.
That's awesome. We're actually 2 episodes away from our season finale.
Oh,
so
nice.
That's very coincidental. We're getting moments are getting really tense, and I'm loving. We've already recorded them because we record our episodes in bulk. Might be a little different with you guys. I'm assuming it's kind of different because you guys' stuff is scripted. But with with D&D stuff, we will get together for a day and we'll record for like 6-7 hours. So we'll have like a month. We'll have like a month worth of material to post. So we're at the point now where I'm releasing an episode tomorrow. And then the week after that is our season finale, and shit just gets wild because in the most previous episode, not tomorrow's, but last week's, it ended with one of our main characters finding out his parents got kidnapped basically by like the BBEG. And I think that's an immense moment for him because throughout the entire show, like his character's been going through a lot of development, like so much with his family and stuff, and to the point where he hated his family from the begining. Like he wanted nothing to do with them. He found out some deep stuff about his mom and his dad, and he even told me out of game. He's like, hey, next season, I'm just going to separate myself from my parents. He's like, Paige had enough of my parents, like, the stuff they've done. Like, I wish my brother and sister good luck, but, like, my mom and dad, I want nothing to do with them because of, like, not that they did anything bad to put them through, but they did some bad stuff themselves for, like, a bad reputation. So I was like, all right, me as a really horrible and mean DM, use that to storytelling advantage. And at the end of the very last episode, he went to his house to tell his parents goodbye for this next mission. And he walked to the door, and I said, you walk to the door, and you see a note on the front door with a knife sticking through it. You pull it down, and it says, we have your parents bring the eye and the hand of Vecna to the lair tonight, or else they die. And he was just like, oh, God damn it, are you fucking kidding me? And I'm like, listen, man, there's shit you shouldn't tell me. Like, I'm going to take advantage of it. But
no, see, that's great though, because like you're the kind of GM I absolutely love to have, because you set story, like character specific stories, and let people kind of grow as they go, instead of just, now we're just going to go through this adventure one way or the other.
Absolutely. That the biggest thing when I started our show is I told them, like, listen, like, if I wanted to play a D&D game, I would just play a D&D game. I wanted to do a podcast, and I feel like if you're doing a podcast, it's more than just playing the game. You're telling a story that's going to draw people in and keep them interested. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's one of those things where it's, you could do really dumb shit and have fun with it, but you still want to kind of be progressive towards an overall story and an arc that's going to pull people in. Like, I actually had a podcast before this I started, and it was actually under the same name, and we did 4 episodes, but it started just going kind of south. Because 2 out of the 3 players, they were doing, really murder hobo-y type stuff, and which I'm okay with in like a regular game. If you want to fuck around, do stuff, that's fine. Like, I'll roll with it and I'll have fun with it. But if I'm doing a podcast and taking my time to do a story-driven, progressive game where people are going to attach to the characters in the world and actually feel for the story, then I want something, maybe more, not mature, but more progressive than that. You know what I mean?
Well, no, yeah. So, you want characters that people are going to actually latch on to, and a murder hobo, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. So eventually that didn't really last too long. We had like creative differences and whatnot. And the other 2 kind of respectfully left because they wanted to do more silly, goofy, we just want to kill things all the time rather than storytelling. The one kid that, well, not even a kid, he's my age almost, that is still with us, Cameron, he plays Tack McNuckles in our podcast. He's been with me since day one, since this all started, and me and him, we found 2 of our other 2 players that we play with and meet up with, about once a month and record with, and it's been nothing but progressive storytelling ever since. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, kind of losing those 2 guys initially, which kind of sucked.
Sure.
But finding these 2 guys, like, it's been a complete progressive story. And I told them from the beginning, like, listen, make a character, give me a backstory, and whatever it is, I'm going to incorporate it into this game, because I want this game to be driven by the characters, not driven by just the DM.
Oh, absolutely.
And the biggest thing with when I set the story plot and I said, listen, you guys have your separate lives, you guys have your separate situations that are happening. And the thing that I find hardest for some DMs to do, specifically in D&D, is when you create a story and you create content or like a world, yes, you want to have your players involved in it, but you want to give your players the freedom to do whatever they want. If they want to find out what's going on in the world and say, piss off, I'm not doing it, they can. And a lot of DMs be like, okay, fine, my story, I'm just going to change my story. Not my case. I said, listen, like, there's stuff going on in the world, and it's still going to, it's a ticking clock. Stuff is progressively happening, whether you pursue it or not.
Whether you're there or not.
Yep, exactly. And they've done they've done a phenomenal job of not only incorporating their backstories and their personal character vendettas into my story, as well as trying to take care of the main plot. And it's been great. I couldn't ask for like a better cast. You know what I mean? That's just awesome. Having an improvised show, I feel like provides a lot to me. So with an improvised show, you know how D&D would work. It's it's on the fly. Like, I have some scripted stuff that for certain scenarios, but I don't know what the players are going to do. Like, they could come in.
You can never expect the players to do anything you want them to do anyway. So.
Oh yeah, they could come in and tell me to piss off and do whatever they want to do, and I'm like, all right, well, I can't say no. One of those things. So
one of the best examples of that too. So one of the best games I've played where we had that going on. So I don't know if you've ever played any of the anything in the Fate system.
No, I have not.
Okay, so there is a really great. Are you familiar with the book series, The Dresden Files?
The name is ringing a bell, but no, I have not had a lot of time for books over the past couple of years.
That's fair. So the Dresden Files is a very, very like deep and awesome urban fantasy setting. It's basically like modern day Chicago, and there's wizards and vampires and all this stuff. And so there is a specific version of Fate that is specific to the Dresden Files. So I was in this game, and kind of like you were talking about, we had the GM had a city going on, and there was all this stuff happening there. And then all of our characters had our own stuff going on as well. And one of our characters kind of had in his past these ties to this like dark carnival kind of thing that he was involved in, and they were trying to call him back to do a favor. And he told me, he's like, hey, I'm because my character was kind of not really the leader, but like just kind of everybody revolved around because I had a store and where we all spent all of our time. And so he reached out to me and basically told me, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's involving my past. Don't ask any questions. And I said, okay. And like literally me and the rest of the characters are like, we got drunk and let him do his thing instead of, the GM kept hinting like, hey, maybe you should follow him and find out. And I was like, no, there's no reason in character I would do that.
Like, I fully trust him. Yeah.
So then that happened. And then he came back a little bit later with a new power and we were like, oh, groovy. And that's it. Like we never asked him what happened. Like it was, I really liked that.
Yeah. The best types of games that you get are the ones where people play in character. Like,
oh, of course.
It just is. Like, I mean, I'm okay with some meta play every once in a while when it comes to certain scenarios, but the best thing ever is when you have a group of people and the party gets split and one person's off on the opposite side of the city and the other two with each other, and something happens to that person that's split off. Meta-wise, you know what happened. Like, you're sitting there, you know what's going on. In game-wise, though, like, your two players don't know what the hell's going on.
Like, you have no
there's nothing to do about
sure.
it. Like, you think he's fine. Like, there's nothing to do about it. And I've played with some parties where they've found, like, they want to, find some fuckery and, like, workaround way to figure out what's going on with him coincidentally at the same time. But the best ones are where it's like, no, the guy's got to fend for himself. Like, you think he's okay. Like, that happened in one episode of our podcast where Tack, Cameron, who plays Tack McNuckles, he was in the city by himself, and he ended up getting kidnapped by drug dealers. While the other two were searching for, just going to shops and, like, gearing up and stuff, he went off on his own. He got kidnapped by drug dealers because he stole some stuff from them. And they didn't know. So there was an entire session where Tack was going through a bunch of shit and got the shit beat out of him, got kidnapped, all this kind of stuff. And my players, like, outside the game, they knew what's going on. They're sitting there, they know. But inside the game, they're like, we don't know. Like, he's fine.
Well, hey, let's go look at another store. Like, you have no reason to know anything's wrong.
The in-character roleplay stuff is definitely what makes, like, not even just so much, like, D&D, but any kind of tabletop game in general. Like, just, like, it's really what separates from, like, you could play World of Warcraft, you could play video games, you can play whatever you want, card games, whatever it be, like deck building games even. But D&D, like, when it's played, like, not even the right way, but the way that I think it's meant to be played, it separates it from just, like, anything else. Or, like, not just D&D, but tabletop games in general, like RPGs. It just separates them from anything else you're ever going to play. My question for you, I have a question for you is, so I talked about the improvisation aspect of, playing, like, an improv podcast or an improv game. So with the line of podcasting and improving and you guys being scripted, what do you think the pros and cons are of having a scripted show are?
Well, obviously, I mean, having a scripted show, what's happening. Like, you can prepare for it. You can prepare, like, as a voice actor, I can read the lines and go, okay, this needs to sound this way. I need to convey this. Whereas on the fly, you've all got to do that at the, drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And you don't really get to prepare beforehand. I mean, they're both fun in their own way. I mean, improv, personally, I find improv more fun because you have no idea what's going to happen and you just kind of roll with it. But scripted, I find that scripted, sometimes you can get some better, like, overall story because it's planned from the beginning.
That's completely fair. That was the one thing, I was maybe thinking too is, well, improv is fun, and I wouldn't trade the D&D improv stuff for, like, anything because you don't know what's going to happen. You have to think on the fly,
absolutely.
And that's part of the fun. You got to think, like, especially as a DM, dude. Like, DMing, I love it. It's fun, but it gets fucking hard sometimes because I'm just they'll do stuff where I'm just like, fuck, I was not expecting that. I got to make something up right now. I don't have time to go through the book and make a new adventure. Like, I got to do this right now. And it's just like, it's fun as hell because it really makes you a better just improver, improv storyteller, like everything. But at the same time, it can be a pain in the ass. But like you said, though, like, having a pre-scripted story, especially for, like, an audio drama podcast, that's got to be great because it's going to be good. Like, what's going to happen. And on top of knowing what's going to happen is, like, how to voice your character. Like, you can read and prepare and, like, know exactly how you make how you have to make situations go. Like, that's something that I think is a very cool aspect of, pre-written audio fiction dramas is because you're able to tell a very immense and deep story without the stress of, well, this might change in like 30 seconds. So I don't know what's going to happen.
No, absolutely. But you do have, so also having like a director, right? So like all of our stuff goes through a director. So he can, when he pieces it together, if he's like, oh, I need a different take for this, we could do that. But the downside is we actually ran into recently, we almost had to change one of our stories because one of our people went incommunicado for a bit and we couldn't get a hold of him. And we were like, well, shit, we need to do an episode and he's pivotal to the story. So we're like, do we have to replace him? What are we going to do? And then fortunately, we got a hold of him and everything was fine. But like, that's the risk you play with doing scripted though, is, I mean, obviously people are living their lives, so, that is the one downside.
Yeah, I feel that too. Honestly, that's kind of the same with doing not a D&D game. If somebody's missing from a D&D game, like a regular just home game, and if they miss whatever, they're fine. They can set up for the session. If I'm doing a podcast, that was the hardest part about starting it initially was, like, I needed the same characters. Like, we all need to be together and record. Because if somebody can't do it, then we're fucked. Because...
Well, yeah, because if somebody misses a session, they're out for, like you said, like 7 episodes.
Yeah, and that ruins just the dynamic of the show. And I can't say, hey, sorry, so-and-so couldn't make the session today, so the next 5 episodes are going to be without him. And I'm like, that breaks the story. And that'll instantly just deter people away. Like, that'll just do it.
No, absolutely.
Like, so that's, I kind of feel you on that one where, thankfully, my current group, we have been doing this for almost a year now, and we haven't really run into too many situations where it's been a very bad scheduling conflict. The one guy I work with, so we have the same exact schedule. That's Greg. Cameron only works till 2 in the afternoon, so he's good to go. Ian, who plays Paid Asher, is a little more finicky. Not finicky himself, but his schedule's a little finicky because he's still in college. He's got like a year left of college, and he works too.
Yeah.
So in the summer, though, we knocked out a lot of stuff because he was like free, like a lot. But even now, the way he's in school, like he's able to make like a day out of every 2 weeks where we get together and do stuff. So I'm very thankful for them and like the work they put in, like the cast and everything. And luckily, we haven't run into a scenario where we're just fucked for like a month and can't get together. Because if that were to happen, like we'd be in trouble.
Oh no, for sure.
But no, yeah, I feel you on that one. Most definitely. So I did have another question for you actually.
Sure.
When it comes to role playing and character immersion. Which is a big part of D&D, but maybe even a bigger part of an audio drama. Because if it's D&D, I can BS a character voice, like, whatever. As a DM, I have to role play hundreds of people. Like, I don't know who I'm going to have to role play as. Like, they could walk into wherever and find somebody. And I'm like, you find a human dwarf named Selena, and I got to come up with a quick, quirky voice for her, like, out of nowhere. Whereas with an audio drama, you know your characters, you know what they sound like. You're able to immerse yourself in that character. So what are like the what's the word I'm looking for, preparations you take, or maybe the thought process that goes behind your mind when you immerse yourself into a character? Like, how do you go about building your character and like how they act, their mannerisms, and like just their voice and stuff? Like, how would you go about that?
Well, a lot of the biggest thing is trying to learn as much about the character as I can, so obviously in this instance, so like one of the characters that I had, I really lucked out. So our director, his name is Josh, is really, really big on doing collaborative work. Okay. And so when we first started, the first character that I voiced, his name is Ross Agent, and he's an engineer. And basically all I knew when he first, got me going, he's like, yeah, he's the smartest engineer in the city, and here's your first script. And I'm like, okay. And so I had to think about it. I'm like, okay, so think about this setting. Think about somebody who would be, so it's this kind of post-apocalyptic, but they have very advanced technology. I'm like, okay, so he's somebody who's an engineer. So he's probably going to be kind of arrogant. He's probably going to be kind of a dick. Especially if he is considered the smartest engineer in the city, he's definitely going to have some arrogance to him. He's going to have, kind of a prickly personality. And then basically, like in our story, he kind of gets forced into helping the commissioner try to find the enforcer. And so he kind of comes in and commissions him to try to track this guy down. And throughout the episodes, he kind of keeps basically getting threatened to keep helping, or else, he's going to end up in jail, or, the enforcer kind of basically keeps saying, you're going to help us or else. And so just kind of like as it goes, I just kind of keep thinking about like, well, what would that do to somebody with that kind of an ego? And so like every time we have an interaction, he gets a little more like distant, but also like more prickly. So like basically to start it off, so for that character in particular, I would, starting off trying to find a voice, I was thinking of something, kind of ethereal, right? Because you have the sci-fi setting.
Right.
He's supposed to be really smart. He's supposed to be really arrogant.
So would you say, real quick, would you say that your director gives you like a creative freedom when it comes to like voicing and like finding like just the feeling and overall feel of the character?
Yeah, for the most part. So I
Cool.
basically the voice I did for the audition, he was like, "That's it. You've got this character." He's like, "You have an idea." And then once we recorded the first like 2 episodes, he was like, "I think you know this character better than I do at this point." And I was like, "Well, I've just been putting a lot of thought into it."
Yeah, you eventually just become the character.
Pretty much, yeah. And so kind of I was trying to think of, one of the biggest things, a lot of the stuff that I do when I do voice acting, I just do my regular voice. It's obviously the easiest because it's, the voice I know the best.
Yeah, you can naturally use your tenacity and you can use your natural tones and
yeah, exactly. Yep. So I wanted something close to my voice, but still wanted him to sound like he's from, this other place. And so when I got the interview, I basically kind of he's a little more of an ethereal kind of voice. And, he's still arrogant, but, he really makes sure to enunciate because he wants you to know he's intelligent. And so that's how the character started. And then, of course, over time, he's gotten much more exasperated. So now, basically, when the commissioner shows in, I usually start off with him saying, "Hello, Commissioner."
Nice. So you're showing it's just character progression, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much just over time, he's just gotten more and more like, "I don't want to be doing this, but I don't want to go to jail." And so that's kind of how that came about. And just like, in the background, talking to the director, I came up with some stuff where I was like, "Hey, how about this? How about this?" And pretty much everything he's been like, "Dude, that sounds great." And so I kind of helped mold the character.
That's awesome. Yeah, character progression is probably one of the coolest things about tabletop games and just honestly storytelling in general. Like, I love being able to listen to whether it's an audiobook or a movie or anything, and just watching these characters go through progressions, like series of movies and like books and stuff, is one of the most satisfying things you can just find. And I feel that's one thing that really makes a lot of D&D podcasts successful, is having character progression, throughout an entire campaign, rather than having a character that's set and they do what they do and they have no, their goals or whatever, but there's no change in dynamic in character. Which, if you want to have a character like that, that's fine. Like, some people are just like that. They have no progression, they don't change. They're always at a baseline, like mid-level. The one thing I did tell my players, and I gave them the freedom to do this, and I'm like, listen, like, engulf your character into this world, like, become your character. Yeah. Like, I even tell them, like it's almost like you're being an actor right now. Like, you're playing a game, but you're also telling a story and you're developing your character. Like, this is you. So, like, go all out. Like, don't be afraid to do creative things and, like, speak in creative tones and do whatever you want to show the progression of your character. Because the thing with a podcast, unfortunately, compared to like videos and TV and movies, is you have to use a lot of theater of the mind. Yeah, that's the biggest thing with it. It's very descriptive, very articulate, very colorful in the mind, and very very. I can't think of the word. It's very descriptive. That's the fucking word. Whatever. I can't think of the right word right now. But you got to think about everything.
Your voice to convey everything.
Exactly.
So it's got to be a little
So as a DM, I'm very descriptive in like the certain situations and things that happen through the world. And as players, though, like the voices for my players, Ian, who plays Pate Asher, he uses his regular voice, and Cameron, who plays Tack, uses his normal speaking voice. So when people listen to the show, they're like, all right, they know who they are instantly. Greg, he uses a voice himself, talks with like a lisp and like a quirk to his accent. And people know that as his character. But as time has progressed, like their normal quirks have like changed. You know what I mean? They go from these happy-go-lucky people to going through all this shit. And
absolutely.
Tack, who's Cameron, who was like, I want to save everybody, is, dude, I don't even care. I just want to get this fucking over with. Like, it's crazy to see how much my players have, immersed themselves in their characters and really progress them over time. And it's almost as if like we're just listening to a story. The only difference between me telling a story and doing a D&D podcast is just our story is determined by dice rolls. Like, that's basically what it breaks down to, like dice rolls and character decisions. And seeing voice acting and characters really change their characters over time, even through just an audio format, is just awesome.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I mean, and honestly, like playing in character too, like, there's nothing wrong with doing a voice. There's nothing wrong with not doing a voice. It's whatever helps you. One of my biggest things is I love to do accents. I've always practiced doing accents like growing up. And so We actually came up once. So the first pen and paper game I played was Hackmaster before I ever played D&D. And Hackmaster is a lot more hardcore about just about everything, including like language proficiency. So you actually, when you're creating a character and you learn another language, you actually have a percentage of how well you speak that language.
Oh,
And
okay.
so one of the things we started to do, denoting, because the people I played with at the time, we were hardcore role players. Like that was our favorite part of the game. And so we started to denote that somebody, was speaking a different language was by doing an accent. And basically how well you do the accent is how well they're, supposedly doing the language. So for instance, like, if we were doing Elvish, we were speaking in a British accent, because, Elvish is of course very, very upper crust,
high class and articulate
very
class.
high class.
Yes.
Well, our thief only spoke Elvish at like a 30%, so he did more of a Cockney accent because he doesn't have quite the grasp.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
so we did little things like that to kind of just help us immerse into it as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. My players and I'm not a professional voice actor by any means. I will say I am proud of my voices from where they came from the start of the show to now, because it's almost kind of like I had to. At first it was for fun, for goofs, like, it was for fun, it was for goofs, the pod, it was costing us like maybe a whopping $15 a month to run the podcast. Like, it's cheap anymore to like do the kind of stuff. So I was like, whatever, we're paying this much a month to have fun, blah, 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 blah. But then like one morning we woke up like maybe 10, 15 episodes in, and we had fan art like on our inboxes. We getting tagged on Instagram and stuff. And I was like, oh shit, people actually listen to our show. And I looked at our downloads. And I'm like, oh shit, we've got a couple thousand downloads. What the hell is happening right now? So that's what I was like, I got to step up my voices. Like, I really got to because I got to start, improving stuff. So like now, I'm by no means professional, but whenever they come across like a different race or like a different like species or something, like I'm gonna do whatever I can to like at least make it stand out. Like, they fought bullywugs one time, and I kind of made them sound like the Gungans from Star Wars, and they would talk like this all the time, and like that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
They encountered, they went to like a saloon type setting one time, so everybody was talking. They were all talking in a country accent, as they come up to the bar, throwing gold at each other, trying to get beers and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Different sorts of things. So it's like I said, not a professional, but I try to make things at least a little different. But there are the voices I specifically do work on are at least the main NPCs. There's 3 or 4 main NPCs that come through, into the game that are helping the guy through the journeys. And they have very specific kind of voices, so they know who they are. And one of them is Darius, and he's like just a young 16-year-old kid who's like shouldn't be out adventuring right now because he is just too young to be seeing some of this shit. And he talks like this. He's just very scared of a lot of stuff that's going on in the world right now, and doesn't know what to do. So he talks like a scared young boy. And the other 2, he has 2 mentors that they talk, more of a deeper tone. Darius, we can't be doing this right now. We need to lead them through. And so they have their specific voices. Then I have what I call the Skyrim voice, and that is my commoner voice, where they're talking to people in town. They go up and they say, "Hey," I tap this guy on the shoulder and ask him a question. I just use my regular voice because I'm just like, I'm not. There's no way I can voice 30 million people, but my voices have definitely improved from the start of the show to now, mainly because A, I've been doing it longer, and B, I had to practice because I started realizing, people actually like our show. People are joining our Discord and sending us messages. I should probably up my game a little bit. So I've definitely made myself more keen to the voice acting aspect over the past 8-9 months, and it's a hell of a time. It's a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoy it.
And it definitely helps you get into character too. If your character has a unique way of speaking or has a unique voice, it kind of helps you get into that headspace.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Like there was one game when we were testing out 5th edition. I was playing a monk, and we were basically playing a game of like everybody is from different realities, and they were all kind of drawn in, right? So I decided to play an Australian monk for no reason other than nobody has ever done that before.
Because you fucking can. That's why.
Pretty much, yeah. So I spent that entire fucking game talking like this, and we had the most fun ever. Like, we would all be sitting, somebody would be talking, and then I would start to cut in, and everybody would laugh before I even said anything.
Because they just knew it was coming.
They knew it was going to be something ridiculous.
That's great.
Because, like, like we went to the bar and I was telling him about, one time I killed 50 drop bears with my own hands. And, they had never heard of drop bears. So I'm, like, we just, kept going and kept going. And our poor GM really was not prepared for me because, he introduced an orc woman. And I decided that as an Australian monk, well, that's clearly what he wants. And so then he persistently began trying to pursue her. And I could tell by the end, he was like, can we move on, please?
So you became the DM's nightmare for that session.
Not on purpose.
Oh, but yeah, no, not on purpose. I've been in this situation, though. And while probably from his shoes, I will tell you, he's probably frustrated, but he probably loved it at the same time. Because there's a borderline. There is a borderline between, there's a thin line between you're wasting my goddamn time and all right, this is funny and let's keep doing it. There's a good line there. And it sounds like to me you were like right on the line of like, it's a lot of fun. So I can't imagine people getting too mad about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of played it like everybody was still laughing, and I was like, all right, that's good. I was like, when people stop laughing, I'll back away.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, dude, and the thing with voice acting and like role playing and just character immersion is, especially if you're playing with a group of new people, like if you're new to the game and like you're not a big role player, if you are at a game with somebody that's role playing like in character and using a voice all the time when they go into combat and they go in to talk to people, like it makes people more comfortable with playing the game.
Oh, yeah.
It makes them want to do it themselves. Because, like, I've played plenty of games where, like, because I'll go all out. Like, if I'm not a DM and I can make a character, you bet your ass I'm going all out. And I'm making, like,
for sure.
I'm doing a voice. I'm doing everything because I DM a lot. So I very rarely get to play as a player. And when I do, like, I'm going all in. And there's been a lot of situations where I've played with new groups of people who are relatively new to the game. They're learning how to play. They go around, they do a lot of meta play. They don't do a lot of role playing. They just kind of talk to each other outside a game and like figure out, oh, what should we do? Let's do this. I think we should do this, blah, 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 blah. Whereas like I come in and I'm like, well, I think y'all should go and do this because it is not the right thing to do. And they look at me like, why are you talking like that? I'm like, fucking role playing. Like I am here to play a role playing game. Like,
yeah,
let's fucking go, man. It's like I played a game, actually an online game, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. A buddy of mine was DMing, and I actually just did a D&D story video about this on our YouTube channel. We were playing a game, and he was DMing for his little sister's boyfriend's, or no, his wife's little sister's boyfriend's friends. It's a weird situation. But he's like, listen, these kids are new, like, they're doing a lot of meta stuff. They're doing a lot of dumb stuff. They're getting themselves killed consistently because they're just not being smart. Can you come in for a night, run a one-shot with me, play as a player, and just kind of like show them not everything needs to be determined by combat or like just murdering everybody or like how to properly role play in the game for success, not just for fun, but having success with it. Because often DMs are going to reward you for doing role play stuff instead of saying, all right, I'm going to persuade them. Like I will... Before I do like any kind of persuasion, I'm going to walk up and then I'm going to talk in character like, oh, well, you see, I really appreciate if you were to do this for me because me and my buddy's here, kind of go on a tangent. And then at the end of that, I say, I'm going to roll persuasion. And then often, maybe not all the time, but, if it's good enough, the DM may say, all right, roll your persuasion check with advantage because you role played that out. That's a good argument. That's a good point. So therefore, he's going to be very convinced of what you're saying or add like to your roll because of what you're doing. Sure. Whereas, sometimes it's not necessarily like that. So I came into this game with these kids and, we were talking online. They were happy for me to be there because they just like playing with people. So I was like talking to them in my normal voice. And then eventually I played as a dwarven bard who, in character, he didn't know these people. He ended up getting caught up in some bad shit with them and he did not want to die. Like that was a big thing. He just wanted to get the fuck away from them. But he was still playing a character. So as soon as the first in-game scenario happened where we were having, conversation, I walked forward and I was like, well, guys, I don't know if we should be going about this because I just want to get the fuck home. And they looked at me and they were just like, what happened to your voice? And I'm like, what do you mean what happened to my voice? And they were like, why are you talking like that? I'm like, this is how I talk, guys. And like, I was just doing some really dumb, lame voice, whatever, just something stupid I did to throw, just to throw some flair out there. And then my buddy Christian, who was DMing, he looked at me like he's role playing. They're like, oh, we didn't know that was like, part of the thing. And I'm like, what? RPG.
It's in the name, guys.
But we played for maybe like 5 hours a night, and then by the end of the night, though, some of them started doing more in-game role play type stuff. And I went back and I played over the weekend with them on Friday. Actually, same kids came back as my same character, and they were all role playing using like voices
Oh,
and
that's
going
awesome.
all out and like having fun with it and like doing stuff in game. And I'm like, oh my god, I feel like I did something right because these kids went from doing none of that to making smart decisions, role playing, using voices, talking like in character. And I'm like, this there's a tear that shed from my eye, and like, that's from a DM standpoint. I'm like, I'm so proud of
So
these
proud.
kids. I was so proud.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
character immersion is definitely, it's great. Like it's like I said earlier, it separates this game from just the rest of the games out there. Like it just does.
Oh, for sure. It's you're throwing yourself into the story, and you're like, no, I want this, and then you get to help tell the story your own way.
Yeah, the thing is, you build somebody too. Like the best thing I tell other people like that are coming to play the game, and I was like, don't be afraid. Well, maybe not be afraid, but try to build a character you are going to be attached to in a
Right.
sense of you kind of feel for him. You want to feel his goals. You don't want to build a
Yeah.
character and say, well, his goals are this and this is why he's adventuring and just not give a fuck about him. You want to be able to feel for that character and try to accomplish those goals. And if you don't accomplish them in character, like physically, you're going to be upset because it's what you want. Whereas some characters like, yeah, he just wants to kill people or something like that. It's like, you may maybe have a little better inspiration or, character-driven motivation than that. But the biggest thing I tell people is don't be afraid to be attached in a sense that you're gonna physically feel as a person happy or sad if they fail or don't fail. Because when when you physically are happy as out of game as a person that your character in game has accomplished their goals, you're on the right track. Like you just are. Like you're building a character backstory motivation that you're going to like.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like you want to be attached to your character to the point where, like, if you're in that scenario where you're in combat and you're down to 1 HP or even at negative HP bleeding out, you want to be like, no, somebody help me. Like, I don't want this guy to die.
Yep.
Because it's it's you.
And the counter side of that is, which is unfortunate, but it does happen, is I'm not the type of DM that's going to intentionally kill somebody. Sure. It's just not my style.
But it does happen.
It happens. I mean, in the game, death happens. People are going to die. People are going to fuck up. Like, bad things are just going to happen. Naturally part of the game. It's just how it is. I'm not going to drop 3 Elder Dragons on a level 1 party. That's just not how the game is. Not. Like there's no rule in the game that says I can't do that, but I'm not going to do that because I'm a good DM. And I want my characters to explore the world, have fun, grow their characters, tell a story. Now, if somebody gets to the point where they're on the brink of death and they do die, I know that I have done a good job as a DM and they have done a good job as a player, where if that character does die, they are physically upset about it. Not mad, because anybody can get mad and tear up the paper and be like, God damn it, I want to die. But if they are physically upset that their character has died in the game, I feel like there's been a good job done, not just from the DM standpoint, but especially the player standpoint for growing attached to their player.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, like you want to be attached, but like you said, you don't want to be too attached where if death does happen, you literally like fall apart. And boy, I had the great advantage on that. So that the first game I played Hackmaster is a very unforgiving game. D&D is much more collaborative. Now, granted, in Hackmaster, it's still collaborative. You're still telling a collaborative story, but there's kind of underlying mentality of us versus them with the players and the DM. The DM's not going to just drop, like you said, not just going to drop 3 Elder Dragons on you because that's bad form. But, he may kind of push, you to encounter something a little higher, or so that, just kind of like try to push the challenge a little bit.
Yep.
And so I learned early on how to deal with losing a character I've grown attached to. My shortest span ever in Hackmaster, I had a character that lasted 2 combats, and that's it.
I think I have you beat on that one. We were playing. Have you played Curse of Strahd for 5e?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually going to be running some people through it for the first time.
Awesome. Soon. Okay, we were playing Curse of Strahd, and I was playing a halfling rogue at the time, and I played him, from like level 1 to 6, so a long time. And he eventually died in combat, and I was very upset about this because I was the first one to die. I was pretty upset about it. I mean, like, I wasn't mad at the DM. Like, it wasn't his fault. It's just that's just how the game goes. Like, you're playing a horror drama game, especially Curse of Strahd. Like, you're playing vampires. Like, so
Oh
it's
yeah.
dangerous territory. And I was like, all right, this sucks, but I mean, I had a good run. I'm upset about it. I was doing my job, playing the game. So I made a new character. I made a Dragonborn barbarian. They introduced him. I forget at what point in the game it was, but we ended up fighting. I think it was like a living tree or a treant or something like that. Coming out of like it was like 3 years ago. It was a while ago, but introduced my character. I was on top of a mountain, like, sticking my sword like a beast. He pulled it out, and I gave like a really cool like monologue. I was on top of the mountain, like, I am so and so, the Dragonborn of this, and I'm stuck here because Strahd did this, and I must kill him to get out of here. And they were like, fucking dope, cool, let's go. So we went on adventuring, and like 5 minutes later, we got into combat. I got hit twice by this treant, crit both times, and got flung off the cliff.
Yep.
And died because I got knocked out fully from the 2 hits, and then I got hit off the cliff, which wasn't super high, but high enough to the point where it did damage me when I hit the ground. So I suffered 2 death saving throws. When you take damage when you're knocked out, you take 2 death saving throws. My turn rolled around again, and I rolled, and I got a 3, and I died. And I was like,
ooh,
welp, that was short-lived. I was there for 5 minutes, and I was like, I gotta make a new character. Like, god damn it. So, yeah, that kind of shit happens. But you mentioned this earlier a little bit about the misconception of, like, DMs versus players. I think that's a big misconception of the game. A lot of people think that, maybe not a lot, but quite a few, especially new players, I'll put it that way. Newer players feel that the game is the players versus the DM. Like, the players got to beat the DM's trying to beat the players. I'm like, nah, fam. Like, if I wanted to beat you guys, I could. I'm like, I got a book full of 400 monsters. I'll throw something at you. The whole point of D&D is to tell the story. Like, the DM is there to provide situations, challenges, monsters, fights, and so forth to challenge the players to their abilities, to pass them, not to just kill them. They're going to be hard. Like, they're meant to be challenging. Like, the DM can make the stories as easy as they want, but what's the fun in that? Like, you have to, the hardest part I find about being a DM, besides, I'm actually making a video about this here soon that I've actually recorded the audio for. Little hit on that is I did the top 5 hardest things about DMing. One of them is balance. It's finding a good balance in encounters and traps and puzzles that coordinates with player level. Because sometimes it's hard, because the challenge rating in 5th edition isn't exactly the easiest thing to follow. The 1/4, 1/2, 1, 2, 5. It's not the easiest, because you got to calculate, all right, how many people do I have? How many... what level are they? Okay, what can they take? And I just throw the challenge rating thing at the window. I use it sometimes, but it's a hard guy to go by. But regardless whether you use a challenge rating system or not, it's still kind of hard to balance encounters the right way, where it's challenging enough where it's not going to insta-kill your players, but it's challenging enough to where when they pass it, you want to see that sigh of relief and that excitement on their face, because this was a hard fucking encounter and they got through it alive and nobody died. Whereas if they get through it in 2 rounds of combat without taking damage, they're like, yeah, whatever, we did it again. So that's the hardest part, because it's easy to make an encounter that's easy to pass. It just is.
Sure.
And it's easy to make an encounter that's, going to be very hard to pass and it's just going to kill your players. But the hardest thing is making that encounter where your players are going to barely make it out alive, but they're going to feel super satisfied when they do, because they did it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I've had a couple situations where, when I was learning how to DM, I fucked up a couple times. I made situations too hard. I just have, and bad things happen. It's a learning experience. But I think the good thing about being a DM and it being an improv-based show and game is that if I start to realize shit is getting a little too rough and a little too hectic, I can always change some shit on the fly if I need to.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one of the good things about D&D. Granted, in like an audio drama like you guys do, you don't got to worry about that kind of shit because it's predetermined. Like, it's a story, your storytelling and stuff. Sure. But when it comes to gaming, it's like, shit, like, I should not have thrown this extra monster at them. I gotta lower its HP or its AC or something, like, right now, or fucked. Right.
Yeah, no, I've had encounters where we were struggling and 2 of the monsters just left. Like, the team was like, they just
they walk away. They're bored.
They walk away. You don't know where they went.
Yep,
I've done. Thank God.
Yep, I've done stuff like that before in certain situations where and not in so much the podcast, but like in home games and stuff, where I've been like, he falls and gets knocked out. Like, what? Shut up! It just happened. Like, just let it go, or you're gonna fucking die. Like, just don't. I didn't mean to make this as hard on you guys. That was like, we actually played last night. And I DM'd last night for some people online. Actually, it's the same group of people I was talking to you about, the kids and stuff. Okay. One of them couldn't make it, and I've been running them through the DM Christian and I, we kind of trade off weekends as DMing. So one weekend he'll do it, next weekend I'll do it. For different groups of people. I was DMing for him and the kids, and one of the kids couldn't make it, but I already had everything set up, and I was like, well, I'll see how they do because the kids are still relatively new. So the combat encounters weren't that hard because they're still learning how to play overall. But because they were down somebody, like they were still struggling, and I was like, all right, I got to do some shit on the fly right now. So like somebody, like just they got bored, or like somebody else, like they suffered like I think somebody pulled their fucking hamstring, like just something stupid I was making up, and I'm like, oh no, like you hit him so hard that he severs his spine. He's still alive, but he can't move. And they were like, that's fucking cool. That's right. And I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that happened. Oh God. And it's funny sometimes when that kind of stuff happens. People mess up.
Yeah.
And it's just part of the game. What was the other question I had?
I just real quick, sorry, that just reminded me of a
Oh,
story.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I've been the cause of that kind of shenanigans before. So we were playing Hackmaster, and I was playing a character. So in Hackmaster, there is a race that is called Gnomelings, which are when a gnome and a halfling have a child.
Oh,
and
okay.
Gnomelings make incredible thieves because people just ignore them.
Oh, they're so tiny, and yeah,
they're so tiny, and they just kind of blend in. And so, like, even if you're having a conversation with one, there is a chance if your perception's low enough that you just like lose track of them. And so I was playing a thief who used this to his advantage. And in Hackmaster, one of the things that really helps with role playing in Hackmaster, you actually roll quirks and flaws for your character. And
okay, cool.
Yeah, so it kind of like helps you like, okay, get into an idea of like, this is how this character goes.
Yeah.
Well, that gnomeling thief had a short attention span. And so I played him like, basically like a hyperactive child most of the time.
He had squirrel syndrome. That's what we call it in the counseling world, is squirrel syndrome. Mid conversation, squirrel. Like, yeah.
Exactly. So we're running in a one shot. Our GM made, he basically themed an entire thing to the Hotel California, where we got stuck inside of it, and he started playing the music on on speakers, and he's like, that song doesn't turn off till y'all get out. And so we're going through, and like, I basically wander off and start exploring because that's what I do. And I start breaking into places, finding stuff, adding to my own treasure because that's how that works.
That's what you do, yeah.
And then I found a monster in a room that was like kind of a big, like, I think it was like a dire rat. And I was like, well, I can't take that alone. So I went downstairs and like tug on the battle mage's robes. And I'm like, hey, I found an interesting thing. And he's like, what? And I'm like, come on. And so I lead them up to it. We get in combat. We're fighting. I, hit it a couple of times, and then I turn to the GM. My next turn comes up, and he's like, what are you doing? I turn to the GM, and I'm like, bored now. So I rolled to basically leave combat and just wandered off. And like, while they're still doing combat, he let me like go off and try to explore. And I go into another room, and like, they're starting to struggle to fight this creature because, like, I'm the main DPS as this thief, as this rogue. And so they're kind of fighting. And I found this statue that moves, and it like stabbed my hand. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. So I go back down to where they are struggling to fight this creature, grab the battle mage's robes, and I'm like, hey, I found something interesting. And he's like, we're still fighting the last interesting thing you found. And I was like, still? So I then roll.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so I re-roll initiative, re-engage in combat, crit, kill the thing in one hit. And I'm like, God, was that so hard? No, come on, look at this other thing. And one of them stops me and is like, that's bad. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't wander off, and like makes me focus for a second. I'm like, okay. And then the battle mage is like, all right, we're done with that. Now, what's the interesting thing that you found? And I'm like, what's the what now?
Oh, that's good.
They're like, you found something interesting. And I'm like, did I? That doesn't sound like me. And then I wandered off again.
That's funny. I know in 5e there is optional charts for you to roll for, like, flaws and quirks and stuff too for character development. They're optional simply because of the fact, some people might not want to role play that kind of stuff, or they want to come up with their own. I think it's really cool, honestly, because there are times where, if I'm running the game, or not running a game, if I'm joining a game with somebody and they say, all right, make your character stay within like these guidelines, stick to these books, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm like, if I can't figure out what I want to play, I'm just going to roll and let the dice determine what I play. I've done that on multiple occasions, and that's some of the most fun I've had, like, playing a character sometimes. Like, I played another halfling rogue by coincidence, but it wasn't like because I chose. It was just what the rules were. It was an arcane trickster, and I forget what his flaws were, but one of his flaws was, he can't keep his hands off of things. So he always wants to steal shiny stuff. So I got my characters into some shit because, like, we were in, like, there was this magic gauntlet we had to get, and they're like, let's not touch that. It looks evil. And I'm like, yeah, but shiny. So I fucking grabbed it, and we had a lot of fights after that. And they're like, why'd you do that? And I was like, because Bingles likes to see shiny things and takes them and put it in his bag. And they were just like, can you not have that be part of your quirks? And I was like, absolutely fucking not. Like, no. Like, this has added a whole slew of fun to the game. And, like, some people get kind of mad about that stuff, but others find it, like, hilarious in storytelling. And
for sure.
Playing in character and, like, playing true to those quirks and flaws is great. For example, Tack McNuckles in our podcast, he has gone through some shit. He started the game as a happy-go-lucky person. He now has an evil artifact, and when he uses it, it drops his alignment twice, or he drops his alignment once.
Sure.
And he's playing it great. He used to be like a neutral good person, and like want to save people, do what he can. He's not lawful. He's not chaotic good, but I mean, like, he's just a genuine good person. Wants to help people. His alignment dropped to just neutral. And there's not that big of a difference between neutral good and neutral, but you can tell, like, he is now not like the minuscule things he would do to, like, maybe help a kid get his balloon. He's just like, whatever, like, or, help somebody cross the street. Like, he's not in spite saying no. He just kind of doesn't care. And I'm like, you're playing that perfect. Like, you're doing really good at just playing that subtle difference, like, in character, like motivation and flaw. And there's more stuff there's more, like, deep stuff that happens, like, within these last couple episodes for, like, character motivation, flaws, and, like, roleplay. Not going to reveal it now because I think this episode is going to air a little before our season finale. So I don't want to, like, put any spoilers out there for anybody. But, it's really cool to see my players go through this kind of stuff. I will say our player, Nomo, Greg, who plays Nomo Sensual, he is a dwarven monk. About a third, maybe like 10 episodes in, not even a third, like 10 episodes in, he was basically a kid, and like he's never adventured, he's never been in any like combat, he's never, he's been in combat, but he's never like had to do some of the dark stuff he's been doing. He had a personality break, like he just went fucking crazy, not in like a sociopathic way, but he had like a split personality. So like in certain situations, that split personality comes out, and he uses a completely different voice. So his regular voice, I can't do it. He talks like it's a mixture of like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch and like a gremlin.
Okay.
So I was like, I talk like this all the time, like that kind of stuff, because he got abused as a child. So like he's got messed up vocal cords and like all this kind of stuff. When his alter ego, he calls, quote, him, comes out, he talks, I'm him. I'm Nomo's protector. I come out when he's in danger and I keep him safe. So whenever he encounters bad shit, him comes out and protects him. And I'm like, that's fucking cool. And then it got even deeper. And he did this mainly for comedic effect, but I thought it was a really good idea. When Nomo was out again, him came out because he was in some danger. Him got hit in the head with a rock really fucking hard during combat. He got knocked out. He got back up. And there was a third personality, which is like the dumb personality. So like when he gets knocked out or something crazy happens, he gets hurt really bad, like it rocks his brain, and his name is K-Dog, aka Kyle, and he goes, "Hey guys, what's going on? Like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm totally here to fuck some shit up." And I'm like, that's hilarious. And like me and him talked about it like in private, and he's like, "Can I do that?" I'm like, "Dude, do it, but don't tell the guys you're gonna do it until it happens." So we were playing the game, and some boulders fell on them because they completely missed a tripwire. It caused like some boulders to fall down. And I say, Nomo, one hit you in the head really, really hard. And he looks at me and he puts his head down. And he's just like, oh, God. And the guys looked at me and they were just like, what does that mean? And he put his head up and he goes, whoa, what the hell just happened? And I'm like, ha. And they looked and they were like, no, please, God, no. And they were like, who are you? And he's like, my name's K-Dog, dude. And he just like completely went off like for like an entire episode like that. Eventually he took a long rest, woke up, and Nomo was back, and Nomo had no recollection of what happened. So there's times where like he'll split between these characters and come back through and be like, I don't even know how I got here. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh yeah. So that the progression I've seen with character flaws and traits and like role playing through our podcast has been great, and not even just my podcast, just like other games I've played. Like it's phenomenal to see. It like I said, it separates it from D&D and other tabletop RPGs just separate themselves from other games in that way. Like you can't get that with other shit. You just can't.
Sure. No, and one thing I was going to recommend to you, by the way, so since you do love doing the cooperative building and cooperative story and kind of letting your players their background play an important part, you should look into the fate system at some point. So that's kind of what it's all built around. Like literally, the first session is like you help build the city and the world that you're playing in. Like the players and GM work together.
Oh, okay. So it's not just the GM or DM making the world itself. Like the players are actually assisting in that. Okay, that's cool.
It encourages because so one of the big things in Fate is there's what's called aspects, and aspects can be called upon for positive or negative reasons. Well, when you're making a character, you set up your backstory, and basically you have like 5 sections of your backstory, and every one of those you have to have an aspect that comes from it. That can be a positive or negative thing, and then during the game, you have what are called fate points that let you like re-roll or add a bonus or something like that, and so you can call on an aspect to do that, or the GM can call on one of your aspects to make you like worse because it has to do with your backstory.
I might have to look into that. That sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah, so like the Dresden game we were playing, I was a wizard who basically got involved with the Fae, the fairies, the winter court of the fairies, and they like all of my memories gone. And so I'm like, I know they're involved, but I don't know how. And so one of my aspects was checkered memory, and so there are times where like something happens, and I'm like, I should know that, and my friend's like, or my GM would be like, but do you? And I'm like, damn it, maybe I don't.
Yeah, that's good. Especially like one of the hardest things about role, maybe not hardest, but like a difficult thing with role playing is when you as a person knows information, but your character doesn't. There's nothing you can do about it. And you're like, fuck, I have to let this play out. Like I just have to.
Oh no, yeah. I am very good at setting that apart, but in this game in particular, I personally like didn't know what I had given that, like what the deal was with my lost memory, because I wanted to find out when my character did, so that I could play that better.
That's cool. One thing that's going on with our campaign that just happened in last week's episode, leading into this week's episode. So I'm actually going to go into some minor spoilers for this week's episode that's releasing. So if you're listening right now, guys, if you don't want to hear, I know we're getting to the end of this episode of Cantrip Conversations, so you listened to most of this, so thank you. I would pause right here and stop until you listen to the rest of today's episode that I'm releasing, or this week's episode. One of our players, Pate, he has had a lot of family like turmoil and issues and stuff. And something that happened was he met up with Tack, who is our known player, his parents. His parents are a part of the cult of Vecna that they're fighting right now. But his parents are only a part of it because they were forced into it when Tack was a child. They gave Tack up for adoption because they didn't want to be part of the cult. They found all this kind of stuff out. Pate ended up meeting up with them. Found them, like a bunch of stuff happened, long story short, found them in an alley, and they had information for them to help, defeat the cult, this and this and this. Pate felt bad for them because they were in the cult against their will, all this kind of stuff. So he told them, and the coolest part about this is, Ian doesn't know this, but I had this predetermined already. I told you about his parents getting kidnapped by the cult. Before they got kidnapped, he told his parents, he's like, here, take this officer's emblem of mine, keep it in your pocket, go to my house. He gave them their address and said, go to my house, show this to my dad. They'll give you, safety till now that we don't have to go back to the cult. And they were like, okay, cool, thank you. And they ran off. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Ian doesn't know that his parents are getting kidnapped by the cult. So when he shows up at the house and he sees this dagger in the door that says, we have your family, he's like, oh, fuck, is this my fault or did this already happen? And me as a player, I already knew. And he's like, he's like, did that already happen? Or is it my fault? Like what happened? And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you, I'm going to let you sit with that for the next couple hours until you find out. And he was just like, no, oh my God. He was so just demoralized after that. I could see it in his face. And that's where we ended the episode when he read that note, and it was just a big cliffhanger. And the episode after that, which is going to be this week's episode, so again, spoilers if you're listening, or if you listened to the episode already, go ahead and listen to this as much as you want. Spoilers. They eventually make it to the cultist lair. They walk into the lair with the BBEG. They look behind him, and they see, very scared and holding the knives, like in their hands, like shaking almost, like worried. They have the knives to his family's throats on the ground.
Oh, shit.
And he was just like, oh my God, I fucking did this. And I was like, and that's where we're ending this week's episode. And he just looked at me, and then he got not like pissed, but I could tell he was at that point with his character where he was just felt for his family, because he looked at Cameron, who's plays Tack, and those are his parents. And he looked at him and he goes, dude, what the fuck? And Cameron looks at me, he's like, I didn't do it. He's like, that's your fuck. And like the episode ended. Like it was over. I stopped recording at that point.
Wow.
And he was like, he's like, those are your fucking parents, dude. And like, Cameron's just like, I didn't control them. Like, you told them to go to your house. And he was like, is this my fault? Are they doing this like willingly? Are they being forced to? This and this and this? And I'm like, I don't know. You got to wait till we record next episode to find out. And he's like, God damn it! Like, oh, dude, like that's why I'm super excited to release the next couple episodes, because people are just gonna like flip when they hear like the shit that I wrote and everything that went like about it, and to see like my players react the way they did to these dark scenes and dark situations I put them in is great, because I finally, it's kind of like a test to see how bought in are they to their characters. How much have they bought in over the last 40 episodes to their characters, what they've been doing. And at that moment, I knew that Ian, at least playing Pate Asher, had fully bought into Pate and his character, because even after we stopped recording, he looked at Cameron and was just like, what the fuck? I'm going to kill your fucking parents, dude. And it wasn't on camera, or it wasn't on audio. He's like, I'm going to kill him, dude. He's like, I'm going to fucking kill him. Like, they have my family to the throats. And I'm like, I'm not recording, right? He's like, no, I know you're not recording. I'm just telling Cameron when I kill his fucking parents, they're going to die. And I was like, oh my God, this. It was so satisfying for me as a DM, because I was like, I did something right. Like, I set a scenario where somebody got physically ill as a person of what was going on because they didn't want to fail. And I'm like, that's it. I did it. I'm happy. I can die a happy man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah. Any other D&D stories or tabletop stories you want to tell?
I was just trying to think if I had any others. I will share one more. Just kind
go
of
ahead.
Another talking about trying to play in character and kind of, I guess like giving tips or whatever, I guess to help stay in character. So one of the things I always try to do too is play based on my stats. So we were playing a monster game. This was 4th edition. We were playing, we were all monsters. And so like we had a kobold wizard and, stuff like that. Well, I was playing a minotaur barbarian. And since he was a barbarian, intelligence was his dump stat.
Yep.
But he had good charisma. So I spent this game, like there was a point where we had to go through an underground area, and it was, basically a maze. And I was like, oh, I know mazes. Well, sorry, the character's voice, because he was a minotaur, was like, oh, guys, I know mazes really well. Follow me. And everybody was convinced I knew where we were going.
Oh,
and I had no idea where we were going or what was happening or anything. I just kept arbitrarily making decisions.
Yep.
And like everybody at the table is like in person hating me because I'm just getting us more and more lost. But in character, like, man, he really knows his way around.
Yep.
This maze must be tough.
I fucking love these games, dude. Like, you can't get this shit with other games. You just can't. Like, in a video game, you know the meta. In a board game, you know the meta. Like, you know it. In D&D, Pathfinder, other RPGs, like, it's just different. There's something about this game. You just can't. Like, it's a one game where, like, out of character, you're like, we're so fucked. But in character, you're like, we're doing great. Like,
guys, we're having fun.
Yeah. That's a lot of people, they assume to use intelligence as your dump stat. like, I was intelligence. I don't need it. But I'm like, well, if you play in character according to your stats, you're going to do a lot of dumb shit. Like, oh yeah, and they're like, yeah, that's fair. So, a lot of people use intelligence as a dump stat for a lot of unless you're a spellcaster, like, you're using intelligence as a dump stat. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know about that. I want to have at least a little bit of intelligence. I want to make some smart decisions,
Sure.
But yeah,
No,
that's good.
I love to use either intelligence or charisma because that makes it more interesting for me to have to play that character.
Yeah. Oh, dude,
Um,
I love playing very charismatic characters. Like
oh
I
yeah, yeah.
love it. Bards are my shit.
What was the one? There was one time I was playing I think he was a wizard, and he had high intelligence but low charisma. Boy, that's fun because you just play him as a snooty dick, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like the for the video I just recorded actually with the group of kids I was talking about. I played Thargan, the bard, and naturally as a bard, I'm dumping everything into Dex and charisma,
Oh,
like
sure.
everything. So he was just like persuasive as shit. So that entire combat scenario I did, like we got into combat initially, and it was like 12 hobgoblins versus me and a rogue. And I'm like, we're like level 6, and hobgoblins aren't that dangerous. But 12 versus 2 isn't exactly a good scenario. The rogue was like,
Sure.
oh, we can take him. Let's kill it. And I'm like, that's I don't know about that, man. Let me do some some fun. Let me try some stuff here. So we infiltrated this castle, and the hobgoblins initially thought we were on their side. We had to kill them, but we weren't exactly in the position to do it. So I was like, I'm gonna pull out my loot, and the DM was like, all right, what you doing? I'm like, I'm gonna play some really bumping music and try to get these guys dancing and partying, because they were the hobgoblins were prepping and getting ready to go to bed and kind of like celebrating a raid they were gonna have tomorrow. They were gonna go to a village and like burn it
Nice.
down and kill humans. So the night before they were like drinking and like eating and preparing and stuff. And I was like, "Excuse me, everybody, I'm gonna be playing some music for everyone to listen to and enjoy with their food." And he was like, "All right, roll a performance." And I got like a 12. But because of me being a bard and what my stats were, I got like a plus 11 to performance, and I was like 23. And he was like, Jesus, what'd you roll? And I was like, an 11. And he was like, what do you get? I'm like, plus 12. And he was like, oh, fuck, these hobgoblins get up and they start grooving to the music. And I kept on convincing them more and more and more. And eventually I was like, all right, I'm going to play some, I'm going to drop my tuning a little bit and start playing some, a little deeper, heavier music. And he's like, all right, and I rolled really high on it again. He's like, all right, they're still having fun with it, but they kind of stopped dancing and like look really confused. They kind of like they're moving to the music a little bit still, but they're just like, what are they? Like, why'd you stop? Why'd you change the music? What happened? Like, it's still good, but what happened? And I look at them, I'm like, oh, you don't know what to do when this type of song comes on? I'm like, it's called a mosh pit. You run around in circles and you beat each other up. And I was like, you know what? Actually, I'll make a deal. Beat each other up to this really heavy epic music and see who the strongest out of all of you is. And I'll teach the last person standing how to play my lute. And he's like, make a goddamn persuasion check and make sure it's good. I'm like, all right, cool. And because I'm a bard, I made sure I was proficient in persuasion and performance, and I got like a 19. So I had like a 31 persuasion check, and he was just like, all right. They start beating the shit out of each other. And eventually they were all knocked out. There was one hobgoblin left. I walked up to him and started like, fake showing him how to play my lute, and the assassin or the rogue came over, slit his throat, killed him, and he went in and, pulled his dagger out and slit the throats of all the rest that were knocked out on the floor. And eventually the rest of the party came back in after taking care of what they had to, and they open the door and they see all these hobgoblins on the floor. I'm just like, oh, you guys took care of it already. And the best part about it was, like, after that happened, like, they all looked at the DM and they were just like, okay, how come he was able to do that? And Christian was the DM was just like, I mean, he role played the fuck out of his character. Like, that's what a bard's gonna do. And that was like one of the defining moments of when it clicked with those kids. They just knew.
Yeah. But it's like,
yeah,
we can do other stuff if we're yeah. Oh,
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep, I did not swing my scimitar a single time that night because I just did shit like that. And that dude, that's I'm telling you, like, role playing, like fucking role playing is the best part about D&D, like, hands down. So
for sure.
with that, is there anything else you'd like to add? Because we've been going on at this for about a little over an hour now, actually. So is there anything else you want to add story wise, or you think you're good?
I think I'm good.
Think you're good? So real quick before we do some closing comments and stuff, I just want to say, if you're listening to this episode of Cantrip Conversations on like iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever your favorite podcasting source is, good for you. We appreciate you. Make sure you give us like a review on iTunes or whatever you're listening to. That's awesome. But just so you know, you could have heard this episode a week earlier if you subscribe to the Cantrip Cast on YouTube. Again, that's the Cantrip Cast on YouTube. You can hear all the Cantrip Conversation episodes a week early before we air them if you're a subscriber. So if you like what we're doing, make sure you head over there, click the subscribe button. We got a bunch of cool, other videos we do. I do homebrew monsters and homebrew classes, D&D story videos. You'll like it a lot. Plus, you get these episodes. So yeah. Thank you so much, Brady, for coming to join. Brady, for coming to join us on this episode of Cantrip Conversations. I'm really happy I got to have somebody a little different on the show rather than somebody that runs a D&D podcast, somebody that does the audio drama type stuff that's immersing themselves in characters. It was really nice to have a conversation with somebody about just playing a character or building a character, in the mindset of it, in the theater of the mind aspect.
Oh, sure, anytime.
So why don't you go ahead and plug your information, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you guys got that you want people to follow you guys on.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm a voice actor. If you ever want to hear, remember to actually update my SoundCloud with stuff that I've done for like auditions and whatnot. It's soundcloud.com/dasgier, DASGIER. And you can find me on Twitter at Brady Hendricks 9.
Cool. And, all right. Thank you so much.
Make sure to listen to the City Within the Walls podcast. Please.
Yes, again. So Average Joe Show and City Within the Walls podcast. I'm going to start listening to City Within the Walls podcast when I wake up and drive to work tomorrow, because from what you said, it sounds really interesting, really cool, and I think it's something I would thoroughly enjoy a lot.
I think so.
So, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Brady, if you want to come back, you're welcome to anytime. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you in the next episode of We Cantrip D&D podcast and the Cantrip Cast. Bye.